What is the natural way to place our feet when we're walking? Well, it depends. We place our feet differently when we're walking downstairs than we do when we're walking on level ground. And the way we place our feet is really critical for the health of our spine and our other joints. I've done a number of videos over the years on how to place the feet properly when we're walking. But I wanted to do this additional video on foot placement because it really varies depending on what we're doing. It's not always a heel placement, nor is it always a ball placement or a midfoot placement. There are different times that we place our feet in different ways depending on the situation. And in this video, I want to get into that a little bit more and also the reasons why you might place your foot differently in one situation than you would in another. If you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Todd Martin, creator of The Walking Code. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we get into the details on the different types of foot placement, I want to clarify that we're talking about walking foot placement and not running foot placement. I know there's a big debate that's been going on for years about how people should place their feet when they're running or jogging, but that's a totally different discussion than walking because the mechanics are completely different. And not only are the mechanics different, but the results or the implications are different because the amount of impact forces on the feet, legs, and other joints when running are many times greater than those that happen when we are walking. So if we're trying to eliminate some of the impact forces that happen when people are running with a heel strike, those forces don't apply when people are walking, especially if they're walking with proper technique, which I will be reviewing in this video so you can make sure you are doing it correctly. Now that we know we're talking about walking foot placement and not running foot placement, the first thing I want to address is the foot placement we use naturally when walking on level ground. And when I say naturally, the first definition I will use for that is how the vast majority of people place their feet naturally without prompting when they're walking on level ground. And if we look at this, you can see that at least 99.9 something % of people walk with a heel placement. I've been observing this for years, and I can't recall the last time I saw somebody walking without a heel placement on level ground. Now, some people will say that is because the shoe companies have built in all of this cushioning and padding on shoes that have made walking naturally not natural anymore. But even if you look at people walking in other countries where using modern footwear is not common, you'll notice that they are also walking with a heel strike. Now, they might not be walking with as heavy a heel strike as some people do here in the US, which can at least partially be attributed to thick padded shoes, but they're still walking with a heel strike. A second definition for naturally that we may choose to use is how did people evolve to place their feet when they're walking? If we're talking about evolution, we can look at some of the anthropological research and recognize that footprints that have been found dating back to millions of years ago from early humans all indicate from footprint analysis that these humans were walking with a heel placement. Also, from the evolutionary perspective, we can see that all other great apes, when they walk bipedally, they walk with a heel strike, not a midfoot or forefoot strike. Then we can think about natural selection. Which type of foot placement would have made it more likely for our early ancestors to survive? When we think about that, we have to think about which type of foot placement would have been more efficient, because when our early ancestors were evolving on the plains and savannas of Africa, they often had to walk very long distances or run very long distances to keep up with herds of animals that they were tracking for their food. So which type of foot placement on level ground is more efficient, meaning burns less calories for the distance that we are traveling and the speed that we're traveling? Studies have been done on this, and they show that heel strike walking is significantly more efficient than forefoot or mid-strike walking. Both forefoot and mid-strike walking require a significant increase in the amount of energy expenditure that we use to travel a certain distance at a certain speed. Mechanically speaking, why is heel strike walking more efficient than either midfoot or forefoot strike walking? The answer is this: the Gait Rockers. The Gait Rockers describe how our foot travels from heel to flat to ball in a rocking fashion, and how our tibia or lower leg translates forward across the foot during that period to help the body move forward in a more efficient manner. Now, some people have commented that our feet are straight and flat and not a ball, so they can't roll, but they do rock. They do rock through 3 specific positions, just like a rocking chair that might actually have straight lines on it rather than a curve, but it is still a version of rocking. And so let's look at the 3 Gait Rockers and how they gain efficiency and how that would be opposed to what happens if we walk midfoot or forefoot. The first Gait Rocker is the heel rocker. The heel rocker begins after the heel is placed up until the time the forefoot hits the flat position. The foot rocks from this angled up position down to the flat position. Now, when we walk with proper technique without excessive heel strike, there is a modest dorsiflexion of the ankle present when the heel hits the ground. Some people have an exaggerated ankle motion or ankle dorsiflexion because they walk in a way that is suboptimal, which may increase that strike of the heel and the amount of stress that occurs during the flattening of the foot. But with a normal gait, the heel rocker should be very controlled. One of the muscles that helps control the heel rocker is our anterior tibialis muscle here in the front of the lower leg. The anterior tibialis muscle helps control the plantar flexion of our ankle or our foot after the heel placement, preventing a slapping of the foot. So as the heel places and then transfers to the flat of the foot, gravity wants to make the foot go down like that, plantar flex. The anterior tibialis muscle slows that plantar flexion down as the weight goes over it. Now, some people have nerve damage or muscle damage or just weakness in the anterior tibialis, and that can cause what we call a foot slap. So the foot slaps the ground very quickly after the heel is placed. That's not a natural heel rocker. That is a heel rocker that is affected by some sort of medical issue or damage, or potentially weakness. So if you have a foot slapping problem, you may need to get that checked out or do exercises to work your anterior tibialis muscle. But for people who have normal anatomy and nerve function, the heel rocker should be nice and controlled. It is not a slap down of the forefoot. Walking towards the camera, you can see that it's not the foot hitting down really quickly. There is a relatively controlled lowering of the forefoot during the heel rocker. The second of the Gait Rockers is called the ankle rocker. The ankle rocker occurs after the forefoot hits the flat position and the tibia advances over the ankle in this manner. As that happens, the body is moving forward over the ankle in that manner. So this would be where the ankle rocker occurs, and my knee moves from behind the heel up to around the front of the toes. That follows the heel rocker and adds additional efficiency to the movement of walking on level ground. The final gait rocker is the forefoot rocker. That occurs after we have reached the end of our swing through, and we're going to bring the forward heel down, and at the same time the rear heel is going to lift up off the ground, leaving only the forefoot on the ground. So that is the forefoot rocker. So again, we have the heel rocker, we have the ankle rocker, and then we have the forefoot rocker. Those rockers allow us to move much more efficiently through space when we're walking on level ground. I'm going to do a demonstration here of the 3 gait rockers, and then what happens if I transition to a forefoot strike, where now I'm retrograding backwards from the forefoot to the heel instead of gait rockering forward. Here's the use of the gait rockers, and then I'm going to just switch to a ball placement without changing the speed that I'm moving my body, and you can see how the translation of my body forward slows down. Now I'm going to begin with the forefoot strike, and the only thing I'm going to change is to the heel strike, and you can see that naturally the body speeds up, but not using more energy. I'm using the same effort for that heel strike as I was using the forefoot strike. So there's not really a debate about which sort of walking foot strike on level ground is more efficient. It is clear that heel striking is more efficient. So the question is, heel striking dangerous, and does that lead to problems that would prompt us to switch to a midfoot or forefoot strike despite the heel strike being more efficient? To give you the best example of this, I'm going to take my shoes off and walk for you so you can see the natural heel strike in bare feet, and see the gait rockers that we just discussed, and see whether or not it appears that there is a huge heavy heel impact when I'm walking. What you'll also notice is as my heel comes down and I begin the heel rocker, you don't see my knee lock out. You will hear that discussed by some people who are proponents of forefoot strike walking, that when you hit the heel, your knee locks out, and that puts on the brakes. That's a very common thing you'll hear. But when you watch me walk naturally with bare feet, you're not going to see any locking out of the knee. You're not going to see any putting on of the brakes. The foot hits very softly on the mid heel and then rolls very naturally to the flat of the foot. I'll walk forward to the camera so you can see that foot roll is not a slap. It occurs in a relatively controlled fashion, rolling from or rocking from the heel to the forefoot and then to the other gait rockers, the ankle rocker and the forefoot rocker. So when I walk like this, there is no more impact that I feel than if I were to walk in this fashion. It is a very gentle placement of the foot, but it does require us to walk very upright with our spine elongated and not pushing back behind us to create momentum. We use the rotation of our core to move through space and place the foot in a controlled fashion. If we rely on gravity, which some people do, and try to walk by leaning forward and pushing, now I am going to have a pretty significant heel strike with a heel impact. So a lot of people do walk like this, and that is much more painful on the heel, especially if you're walking on concrete. But even walking on this AstroTurf, I can feel that impact if I am walking with this sort of technique. So, of course, if somebody tells you that heel striking is not natural and that you should try forefoot strike walking, If you're walking with a heavy heel strike and you switch over to a forefoot strike, which is hard to lean forward into a forefoot strike, then you absolutely will feel less impact with the forefoot strike. But it doesn't mean that that forefoot strike is natural, especially not evolutionarily natural. It just means that you have developed a very heavy heel strike, and you may in fact have developed that heavy heel strike because of the heavy cushioning and padding in your modern shoes that have allowed you to do that without feeling the impact as much as you would have otherwise. The problem is that even if you don't feel that heel impact with the poor walking technique, it still causes a lot of extra stress on the knees, the hips, and the back that can cause wear and tear over time and lead to chronic issues like back pain, hip arthritis, knee arthritis, and plantar fasciitis. A lot of people suffer from those sort of problems, and that is why so many people are looking for walking alternatives and turning to things like forefoot or midfoot strike walking, because the way they're doing it already doesn't feel good to them. And I totally understand that sort of feeling. So what about walking downstairs? When we walk downstairs, we don't typically place on the heel, we actually place on the ball of the foot. And that is the most efficient way to go downstairs. So here we're going to have a variation compared to how we walk on level ground. So why is that different? When we're walking downstairs, the energy that we're spending is in trying to lower the standing leg as we bring our swing leg foot down to the ground. So how much energy does it take to lower the body? If we try to place on the heel, which we can't stretch down any lower than this, we have to lower a significant amount in order to bring that heel down first. It's also going to very likely cause us to pitch over at the waist in order to place in that fashion. On the other hand, if we're placing with the ball of the foot, we have a significant increase in our reach of the foot down to the lower step. And there, once I hit the lower step with the forefoot, I can release the energy in my standing leg hip and transfer it to the new standing leg on the lower step as I lower my heel to the ground. That takes a lot less energy than lowering with the hip of the standing leg all the way down until I hit with the heel or the midfoot on the lower step. When we're walking upstairs, we have yet another variation of our foot placement, because here we're going to use the flat of the foot to place and then shift forward and push up. The use of the flat of the foot takes a lot of stress out of the calf muscle, which would be necessary if we were trying to walk upstairs on our tiptoes, which some people do try to do, but using your tiptoes like that adds a lot of stress to the calf muscle. When we use the flat of the foot, we have a very stable balancing position as we shift forward and up, and then finally as we push up with the standing leg. Then we place the flat of the foot, we shift forward and up, and then push up to complete. And then we walk forward, and when we walk forward, we have our natural heel placement. When we're walking down a hill, the way we place our foot is going to vary depending on our choice and on the steepness of the hill. This short hill here is rather steep, and I can choose to either place with the heel and go down, or I could choose, like I walk downstairs, to place with the forefoot. If a hill is significantly steep, placing on the forefoot may be a more natural and more safe way to do it, because I'm placing in a very controlled fashion and I actually have grip with the toes and the forefoot to make sure I am stable as I am placing. But if I place with the heel on a very steep hill, there is a potential for the heel, which has no traction, to slip out from under me and cause a fall. So my personal preference on a hill that is this steep would be to go down like stairs and place on the forefoot in a very controlled fashion. On the other hand, when walking on a much lower grade hill, I'm going to naturally place on the heel because there's not as much risk of falling, and we have an efficiency issue. If I walk down as if I was walking downstairs on this sort of slope, then we're going to have very little traveling of the body as we move forward. So it's much more natural to have a more full stride and placing on the heel. Although we don't lift the body forward of the standing leg if we're going downhill properly. We want to keep the weight back on the rear leg and then lower and place. Even on a hill that's not very steep, I don't want to launch myself and then land like I'm trying to walk on level ground. I place the heel, I shift forward, and then I cycle the swing leg forward and lower down in this fashion to the heel, shift and lower. So that's the proper way to place the foot, but also the mechanics for placing the foot correctly when going down a low grade hill. Of course, I do have specific videos on the mechanics for walking up and down stairs, walking up and down hill, and walking on level ground that are on the channel, or you can get by going to the Walking Code archive on my website. I'll link that above. That's for those of you who really want to get into the core mechanics of how to do these sort of movements properly. My final comment for this video is that when we're walking on precarious ground, let's say in a forest with dense underbrush or some other situation where it's not clear whether the surface is slippery or there could be something dangerous on the surface, in those situations, it is perfectly naturally to place on the ball of the foot and go very slowly as if we were tiptoeing or sneaking around. In this sort of situation, efficiency isn't the key. In this sort of situation, safety is the key. And so we adapt to a different form of walking because of the specific situation. But in modern life for humans, if we're walking in our home or in a shopping mall or in a city or most other situations, the ground is such that we can walk focusing on the efficiency, placing with the heel, and taking advantage of the 3 gait rockers. So my hope for you is that you will find a way to walk that's comfortable for you and reduces the impact on your joints and allows you to walk without heel pain, knee pain, hip pain, or back pain, and keep your body healthy and comfortable for a long lifespan. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.